Welcome everyone in this new video live development about auto-touch building an auto chess game. In this video we're not going to touch the project once more. We're going to talk about how you optimize and think ahead about how you optimize multiplayer and performance ahead when you think about your tech design, so how you're going to build your code and your game. So you might want to skip that video if you're not interested in that subject, but because we're not going to do anything in the project to keep things separated. But it's kind of interesting because I was thinking about how we're going to develop the game, the different systems of the game during the course of the previous week, and I realized there was really many ways to implement an auto battler game, an auto chess game, and it really depends. And the way you implement it really depends on your game design. One of the most obvious things is that if you don't allow players to look at the other players' battlegrounds, battlefields and benches, you don't have to represent that represent the other player benches to one player. So each player only has like his own bench to represent on his game, which means instead of having like all of the players' benches on his map, which means the game can run easier on most of your machines, because it only has to have, so each square is like an unit. This is like your shop, this is like your bench, so where you handle your units, and this is like your battlefield. This is like red are enemy units and blue are your own units. So wonder what if you have to have the bench of each player on the battlefield. You would have a bench for each of these players, and wonder what if you are running the game on the smartphone. It's not going to like having other players' battlefield on the map. But if you never see the other player benches, if you're not if the game mechanics don't allow players to see each other benches, it means you don't have to represent them whatsoever. And same thing goes for the battlefields. If you can preview all of the battlefields when your own combat phase ended, maybe you want to see the other player battles, like in Dota Underlords, for instance. So you have to have a physical representation of the other battlefields on your map, which means like 20 more, 40 more units per battlefield you have loaded on your machine. So this means a lot of performance to consume, and not to mention the multiplayer bandwidth traffic it creates, because you have to handle the health of all the other units. So so the way we're going to set up our game is kind of a really game defining question, because it makes it so some mechanics are unable to be made. So one of the the superior way to do it, I think, is to only have one battlefield, one bench, and one shop on your map at one time. And and if you want to see the other player benches, battlefield, and shop, you are just going to handle a list of units on a grid somewhere, and you're going to load them on the only battlefield the player sees. So I see my units, they are fighting, then I press like see other player. I click on the portrait of another player to see his own battlefield, what happens on his battlefield. And when I click, it actually removes all of the units on the battlefield I have under my eyes, and it instantly spawns the units of the battlefield I clicked on. But to do this, you have to keep track of each battlefield current unit position and stuff like that, and I think I don't want to handle this in our video. in this development, even if it has lots of pros regarding the performance gain, but it's kind of high level management, and I think I'm not quite up to the task, even if it could be some kind of easy system. I don't think I have the capabilities to do that, because if you switch battlefield, you also expect to see units actually fighting each other, and if we make the units appear, it's like we have to keep track of each unit's current animation, because when I click on another player portrait to see his battlefield, I don't want to see his units doing nothing. I want to see them doing what they were doing when I clicked on the portrait of the other player, like seeing the unit in action. So I'll have to store the animation of each unit. Well, I mean, there could be some system I'm not seeing there, but I feel like it's kind of hard to do it in the mega optimized way. So I think what we're going to do, we're going to have on one map at a time. So on one client map, we're going to have the player base and the battlefields. So the player base is going to be your bench, your shop, and the battlefield representation. You're going to be able to drag and drop your units there, and each player is going to see his own bench. You are not going to be able to see other players' benches. And when you enter combat phase, we're going to teleport all of these units on one battlefield, one chosen battlefield on the map. There are going to be 4 of them. And to avoid having to replicate each of the battlefields when actually we can only see one at a time, we're going to make it so each battlefield is kind of far away, and units have some kind of replication distance. So if you're far away from a unit, it's not going to replicate. So we're going to save a lot of bandwidth traffic with with what we call network relevancy. So if I'm player 1, I'm fighting player 2, I'm going to be on that battlefield, for instance. I'm going to see player 2 units while I'm player 1 and my player 1 units. They're going to fight each other, and I'm not going to be replicating the other battlefields. But if I click off one of the player portraits, it's going to teleport my camera to another battlefield, and it's going to be starting to replicate the units there, because I'm going to be much closer to them, and they are going to start being relevant to my network. And I'm not going to be replicating the units on my battlefield, on my own battlefield anymore. So that's how we're going to set it up for our own game. And I wanted to also talk about how we can build different blueprints to build the units actually fighting in the battlefield and the units on our bench, just like if we had like a BP, like recruit units, a blueprint we use during the recruitment phase, and a blueprint battlefield units, a blueprint we use when we fight in game. And I think that's actually what we want to do, because when we are in our base, units are actually not moving, so they don't need a they don't need a movement component. They are not fighting, so they don't need an ability component. They don't even need to be replicated if we don't see the other player benches. So that's a lot of gain, a performance gain we have. So I think the units in our base are going to be like dummy units, and the units on the battlefields are going to be like combat units, combat actors and dummy actors. So if it's not clear to you, don't worry, we're going to build it anyway, so you're going to see what I mean. So I really needed to do that some tech design before I dive into we dive further into the development of the game, because this stuff is going to kind of drive everything we do afterwards, not to mention how we enter and leave the game, like I was mentioning in the previous setup video, tech design video. So this is pretty much it for what I wanted to tell you in this video. This is kind of the thought process I followed to determine what we were going to do and what classes and blueprint and organization we were going to do. So hope you guys enjoyed that insights and hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.